All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Gorewski, and I'll be your host for today. What are we up to? We just wrapped up World Ocean Week, which was a pretty crazy week last week with, I would say, getting close to between 50 to 20 live events with ocean explorers, scientists, and researchers from all over the world. You can check out those recordings on our YouTube channel, Exploring by the Seat. And then, it's 2 more weeks really left in the school year of us doing live broadcasts. We have a ton of cool stuff coming your way, including live on Canada's only research icebreaker. We've got some Darwin 200 events. We've got Jane Goodall joining us in June on the 19th, which should be pretty fun. A really cool way to end the school year. But today we get to do one of my favorite things, and that is to go live into the field. And somebody who has taken us to so many of Africa's wild rivers over the last few years has been Joe Cutler. Joe is an ichthyologist, a freshwater ecologist, an African river explorer. He's also a National Geographic explorer as well. He studied volcanic crater lakes in Cameroon. A few years ago, he completed the first mega transect of Gabon's Cuito River in over 100 years. This is one of Africa's last wild rivers. This guy just doesn't stop when it comes to getting onto rivers. Recently, he completed an expedition in Angola, and now he's about to launch another one on the relatively unexplored Kabompo River in Zambia. And we're lucky to have him hanging out live with us right now. Let's grab Joe. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. Hi, everybody. I'm doing great. It's great to be here and be able to share this experience here on the Kabompo River in Zambia. It's pretty spectacular here right now.
Amazing. Well, let's start off with a little pan around, Joe. Show us where you are.
Yeah, so right now I'm seated at the base of the Kabompo Gorge. Looking behind me, you can see where the water's flowing out, and it's a little hard to make out, but there are really tall cliffs there behind me. They're probably 100 meters, 300 feet high. And the whole of the Kabompo River is funneled through this little tiny narrow channel in the rocks. And it's fast flowing. It drops about 100 meters in 2 kilometers, and it forms these really massive rapids that we're not going to be paddling, but we're going to be starting paddling here, and we're going to go all the way down this river. It's about 750 kilometers until we reach the Zambezi River. And the Kabompo River is one of the most important tributaries of the upper Zambezi. So let me show you around. We've got a big, nice pool here. I'm going to show you, we've got, tents pitched in perfect spots over on little islands. Hopefully there are no crocodiles tonight. And our camp is kind of tucked into the woods over here. But you can't see it from where I'm seated. I've stepped away a little bit so I can be as loud as necessary and as enthusiastic as possible on this call.
Perfect. We like to hear that, Joe. Let's go back in time a little bit before we talk about the upcoming expedition. You just finished, quite an exciting, a grueling at times expedition in Angola. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so we did the second ever transect of the Cuito River in Angola. And the Cuito River is one of the 2 important tributaries of the Okavango River. And you might have heard of the Okavango. It's one of the most biodiverse habitats in Africa. It's full of incredible animals, hippos and elephants and buffalo, tons of antelope, lions, leopards. And the water that feeds the Okavango Delta actually takes its source in the Angolan highlands. And so what we did is we started at the source of the Cuito River, and we paddled for 54 days, 1,313 kilometers, all the way down Angola and to the Namibian border, and that's where we stopped. It was a hectic and long and dangerous expedition. I have never felt more afraid on any of my expeditions. The hippos were crazy. We were chased by hippos. We had to, push our boats into the reeds. There was one day actually where we had one hippo attack 3 of our boats in about 5 seconds. So it was like we're paddling along, river's calm, and then suddenly I see this giant brown form erupting from the water underneath my boat, and it hits my boat, spins my boat around, knocks my captain out of the boat. Then it goes, hits boat number 2, goes underneath boat number 3, and hits boat number 4. So we had 4 people swimming in the water with a hippopotamus, an angry hippopotamus. We had 2 boats floating down the river with no passengers. So, they're just floating down, gear floating all over the place. And, I had to go out and rescue one of our teammates with my canoe because I stayed in my canoe despite being hit by the hippo, and rescued my teammate, brought him over to shore, and then paddled downstream and picked up all the equipment and the boats that were floating away. So that was pretty hectic. And then from there onward, it seemed like every group of hippos that we saw, they were aggressive. And so it was really scary. But it was also a logistically really challenging expedition. It is in one of the most remote parts of Angola. So there are no roads leading to and from this river. We went 30 days without being able to resupply ourselves. So that means 30 days of food and planning for 10 hungry people on the expedition. And, by the end of those 30 days, we didn't have much food left, and we were pretty skinny and tired and eager to get some food back in us. And then on the second half of the expedition, we had slightly better access. We got more food. We're able to live a bit better, but then the hippos became problematic. It was a really exceptional expedition, though. I have never seen such a pristine river in my whole life. The water was crystal clear, full of fish. You could identify the fish as they swam by you, and you could also identify the crocodiles as they were swimming under your boat. We saw a lot of 6-meter crocodiles. That's an
Wow.
18-foot crocodile, and those definitely would eat a person if they were given the opportunity. So that was a bit scary as well.
Yeah, you've had so many experiences with hippos on the rivers, and I've heard stories, but this sounds like the most intense by far. I've got a little picture here. This isn't one of Joe's pictures. This is a picture that I took recently in the Kruger area, just to give you an idea of hippos in the water and why you wouldn't want to come face to face with a mouth like that. Yeah, unbelievable, Joe. I'm glad everybody got out okay.
Yeah, me too. It was touch and go. And I'll tell you, it's really different when you're sitting in a canoe at eye level with those hippos, and you've got to make the judgment. Do we paddle on the left? Do we paddle on the right? Do we push through the reeds? What do you do? You've got to get past them somehow. They're not going anywhere. So it was pretty hectic. And actually, here on the Kabompo, we've heard that there's an aggressive group that has been attacking boats and biting people. So we're going to have to tread very carefully when we get into that area.
Absolutely. I'm sure you are. That telltale sound probably raises the hairs on your neck. That yeah.
Yeah, I know that sound very well. And it doesn't bode well when you're sleeping in your tent and you hear them calling downstream. You know that you're going to have to paddle past them in the morning. So
Yeah. Wow.
we had some really hectic experiences on the Cuito. I'm hoping that this Kabompo River will be a little bit more enjoyable because that one was just scary.
So I've got a question here in the chat, Joe. When you're on a river like that, like the Cuito, do you see many, indigenous people living along the river? Do you see many people at all?
On the Cuito, there were some communities, but not very many. It was actually surprising how few people we saw. We probably only saw a handful of fishermen on the whole river. Um, people aren't really fishing in that area, and it's also a bit seasonal. People are mostly farming as it was the wet season. But there are communities along the river, and as often as possible, we stop and we spend the night and we go introduce ourselves, explain the science that we're doing, explain why we're out there, and then we ask questions because they know the system much better than we do. We can ask questions like, how has this river changed over time? Are there animals that have disappeared from the system or fish that have disappeared from the system? Are the fish more abundant or are they less abundant? Are they bigger or smaller? So we can learn a lot. Even me as a PhD ichthyologist, I can learn a lot about the fishes from the local communities. And I find it to be one of the most enjoyable things about these expeditions is speaking with people. In fact, yesterday we went to see the paramount chief who controls the northwest of Zambia. And so we went to the palace to pay our respects and ask for his blessings before we head downstream. So to me, it's one of the most important things about the work we do, engaging with the local communities, and I absolutely love it.
All right, of course. Why would you ignore that knowledge that's just there? You know, years of knowledge, fishing the rivers, experiences. They've seen it change over time. Yeah, absolutely. Treasure trove. One more
Totally.
picture before we talk about some of the fish. I want students to see what you were on the river in. So let me stop my screen share and share a different screen now to show the boats. These aren't, these aren't pleasure crafts. These aren't big. Can you tell us a bit about the boats, Joe? I can see solar panels strapped to some of them.
Yeah, so these are replica dugout canoes. They're called Makoros here. And each boat has two people in them, and then it is absolutely loaded with gear. So not only are you packing a bunch of food, you're packing all your camping stuff. We're sleeping on the banks of the river. We've got to bring all of our power kit, so solar panels and batteries, and then a ton of research equipment. So we've got nets and audio recorders. We've got all the stuff. We've got a mobile laboratory that we carry down the river with us, and it allows us to study these systems in a way that's never been done before. So we are collecting information, scientific data that has never been collected before. We are the first people pioneering a lot of this data collection methodology in these systems. And it's really teaching us a lot about how these rivers function, what are the important tributaries, and how we can protect it looking forward.
All right. Let's look at some of what you're chasing while you're out there. Give me a second to share a different screen, and then we'll take a little look at some of the biodiversity. Okay, here we go. Window, this one. So there we go. This first picture is, again, you out on the river. I can see cameras there too, so it looks like you're always documenting what you're seeing
Yeah,
too.
we've got a 360-degree camera that every minute of the transect it takes a photograph, and we stitch them all together almost like a Google Street View. So then you can click play and you can just travel down the river looking at those images. And anytime you're curious, you can stop the stream and you can pan around and look around. You can see me scratching picking my nose or scratching myself. Um, all of it's captured. And you can see my captain there, Paolo. He and I have paddled a lot of kilometers together. I must say, this work that I do couldn't be possible without my team members. I'm not going down these rivers alone. Oftentimes it's 10 or 12 people, and everybody's got a different role and responsibility. My job is the science. But we've got people whew, who wear a lot of different hats. Sorry, I'm getting buzzed by the sweat bees here. One of them just crawled into my eyeball. So sorry about that sudden panic.
Yeah, no, you know what? You're a trooper, Joe, sitting out in the river with the insects, so you can hang out with us today. Very, very cool. I know that's not easy. Let's get into the biodiversity here. I love some of these pictures here of this little tank that you were using, and it's small species, but it's just an amazing array of species here.
Yeah, I'm a fish geek. I absolutely love fishes, and I I love carrying this little photo aquarium with me, both because it allows me to see the fish better, but it also allows me to share the fish with other people. So a lot of people, they have grown up fishing and catching and eating these fish, but to see them swimming around in clear water is such a unique opportunity. And those fish may be small, but they're really important for science. They play a really key role in the ecosystem. And in a lot of these small headwater streams, like where the rivers begin, you don't have big fish. You've only got small fish. the fun thing for me as an ichthyologist is a lot of those small fish are new to science. So
Yeah.
we have the opportunity to be collecting and documenting undescribed species on these expeditions, which is always a thrill.
Very cool. And I know another challenge too is some of them can look so similar that you're trying to look for those characteristics and figure out which species you found and is this one new to science.
Totally. Yeah, some of the groups are really easy, and then other of the groups are just a nightmare. As you can see in this photo, we've got a lot of small, similar looking fish, but there's quite a bit of diversity in that catch.
Mm-hmm.
We've got two different species of top minnow, two different species of, we've got a true minnow, and we've got a climbing perch. And that climbing perch is a really exciting fish for me. I've actually never seen that species before. So every time I get to see a new species for the first time, I get really excited.
Of course. And then I think some of these pictures might be more recent collections. These were kind of the most recent ones on your WhatsApp feed.
Yeah, so to me, we've just got a new piece of equipment and I'm so excited about it. It's called a backpack electrofisher. And it's like Ghostbusters. You really look funny. You've got this big funny backpack on and you've got a wand that you're sticking in the water and you're wearing chest waders and elbow length gloves. And you have all that protective equipment on because we're putting electricity into the water when we're in the river itself. And so we had the opportunity to electrofish in a set of rapids about 40 kilometers upstream from here. And it was spectacular. We've got a few photos coming up here. This is a fish, Enteromius brotziensis. It's a minnow, and it's really clearly distinct because of those round dots on its back there. But a spectacular little fish, one that I really enjoy every time I get the chance to see it. But that was a surprise for me because when you're fishing in fast water, you expect to see fish that are adapted to live in the fast water. All of the minnows that we caught were actually on the bank where the water was a little bit slower flowing. And then some of the other fish that we caught were right in the current.
And then on the front, Joe, are those tiny little barbels help it sense its environment?
Yeah, so it's got little barbels or whiskers. And actually, this fish used to be in the group Barbus, which is named after those little barbels. Recently, a few taxonomists, so fish experts, said, oh, actually, the ones in Africa are totally different than the true Barbus, which are located in Asia. So they've changed the name of the genus, and now these all fall into Enteromius, but you can call them Barbus if you'd like.
All right. Before we take a look at some more fish, I just want to remind anybody tuning in not to be shy. Use the chat sidebar to send in some questions. Looks like we've got a good crew joining us right now, so don't be shy to send in those questions. But let's take a look at some more of this fish biodiversity.
Yeah, so this is one of those rapids adapted fish. You can see it's got this big funny looking snout and big fleshy lips. That is really characteristic of its group. It's a labio, and these labio only live in rocky, fast-flowing habitats. So you don't really catch them very often when you're sampling with other techniques. You really need to be using a technique like electrofishing to catch these fish. And boy, when you hit them with a shock, these things come shooting out of the water like a little shark. They're really spectacular. And, there's only one described labio in the Zambezi system, but I've got a suspicion that there might be other undescribed species in this group as well. So I'm really excited to get into the museum and have the chance to really get a good look at these fish.
Yeah. And Joe, are these, when you put the shock through the water, is it stun the fish, or is it's strong enough that they're done? They're easy to collect then?
It just stuns them. It's a really momentary shock. So basically, you'll be shocking the water. You'll just see the fish kind of turn, and then you scoop it up with a net, and you put the fish into a bucket, and the fish comes right back to swimming normally. So it's a really great way to see the diversity. and you can also release the fish when you're done. So that's great.
All right, here's another cool looking character.
Boy, these are some of my favorite fish in the whole world. These are the stargazer catfish. These are also rapids adapted catfishes. They're one of my favorite catfishes because they don't have any spines. They can't sting you. Most of the catfish, when you're handling them, you have to be really careful. These ones are just nice and soft and beautiful. And they've got these really crazy big fins. And you can see that its tail fin is actually really small. It's not a great swimmer, even though it lives in the fastest flowing water. What it does is it uses these big fins and it kind of walks on the bottom and it moves itself around on the rocks to go and pick up little aquatic invertebrates that are living out there. So it's one of my favorite fishes. And again, really hard to catch with any other technique. And I also think there are probably undescribed species in this group as well. So very exciting, really important to catch these fish.
So, Joe, Miss Clark's fourth graders are hanging out with us, and they want to know how many species do you think you collected on that in Angola on that last trip?
In Angola, I've tallied it up. I counted 83 different species of fish, and I know that I missed some. So 83 is a pretty good catch for 54 days on the river. Um, and interestingly, some of those fish you only catch at one site. So, you really do need to explore the whole river system to be able to understand the diversity of the fishes within a river. Um, and, it probably is the most comprehensive collection of fish ever from the Cuito River system. So I feel pretty proud of my effort on that river.
Yeah, you should, Joe. You and your team are doing an incredible job. I love the look of this character. Almost looks like a little whale.
Yeah, these are really funny fish, really odd fish. Um, this is a mormyrid, and they are, they're in the aquarium trade, and people call them baby whales, actually, or dolphin fish. What's fascinating about these fish is they're electric fish, but they're not really strong electric fish. They're not giving out a big shock or anything like that. They actually use their electricity almost like a bat uses sonar to echolocate. These mormyrid fishes use electricity to electrolocate. So they can sense their environment by their electric field that they produce. Um, and what's even more fascinating, they've got a language. They can communicate with one another using this electric organ discharge with their little electric field. So each species has its own waveform, and then by modulating the frequency of their discharges, they can communicate different messages to one another. So one of the most obvious ones is during breeding season, the males will set up a territory and call for females. And some of my colleagues actually recorded the males' breeding calls and went out into the river and played those back into the stream, and they were able to call in female fishes. So we actually can communicate with fish,
Wow.
albeit only these ones. And then the final thing that's amazing about these fish, they have a giant brain. Their brains, as compared to their body size, are actually bigger than a human brain. So these are considered the smartest fish in the world. And it's really just a fascinating group. They are incredibly diverse, especially in the Congo Basin and in Gabon, where I've done a lot of work. So they're one of my favorites as well.
Very, very cool. Well, I've got a couple more questions here for you, Joe. On a typical day, how many different fish might you catch? How on a good day, what are you catching? How many?
On a good day, maybe 20 species at a single site. So, maybe I'll spend 30 minutes or an hour with my little dip net on the side of the river. And, then I will go through each individual fish and look at it and identify it. And on a good site, 20 species. But my record is over 60 species at a single site, albeit that was in Gabon. So
Wow.
Gabon's a little bit more diverse than the Zambezi Basin, so we're going to tend to catch more species in that area. But 20 species at a single site is a lot of work processing and photographing, and whew, and taking samples of those fishes. So, um, uh, yeah, 20 is good. When we were actually sampling the rapids just upstream, I was thrilled about the fish we caught, but we only caught 12 species. So sometimes it's not about how many different species you catch, but which species you catch. And the 12 species we caught at that last site, they were all special.
Yeah, absolutely. And would it be, 20 species? Would that be like 130 fish caught? Or, what if we're looking at just quantity?
You know, it really depends. So, that site where we had all the fish laid out, we had over 130 of a single species at that site. So you might be able to catch 200 fish, but sometimes you only catch, 25 fish and you'll have 15 species in it. So, not every site you're getting huge numbers of fishes. And my goal is not to catch huge numbers of fishes. My goal is to catch different diversity. So if I keep catching the same fish over and over and over and over again, I'll just release them back into the stream, or I'll move to a different part of the river where I can catch something else, because I don't need 130 representatives of one species. I need 5 or 10 or 15 of them. And that's a good enough collection to describe an undescribed fish.
All right. We got a couple more here.
So this is a spiny eel. These are, man, I'm going to say this every single fish you show, but these are some of my favorite fishes. Uh, they they're not true eels. They just look like an eel, and they are totally independently evolved. They're not closely related to at all, and they're called spiny eels because they have all these razor sharp spines on their back. And so if you handle these fish and you don't know what you're doing, you will end up with bloody hands. And they're fascinating fish because they are everywhere in Africa, but you rarely catch them because they are so cryptic. They're always living buried in the vegetation or under the rocks or something like that. So this is another fish that, unless you're sampling with the right techniques, you're not going to catch these fish. So that was a thrill. We got 2 of them at the last site, and I was really excited about it.
All right. Final fish, Joe.
This, I believe, is an undescribed species, so this was a good one to select. So this is an Anacharax, and these guys, they love fast flowing water, and they're buried in the vegetation in that fast flowing water. And like the labio with the sucker mouth and that amphibious catfish, this is a rapids adapted specialist. It's got really big fins to allow it to grab onto the rocks and survive in that fast flowing current. And there are a lot of different ones in Africa as well, and I'm pretty certain that this one might actually be new to science. So I'm excited to have the specimen and take it to the museum. We work with the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, so these fish will very soon be living the urban lifestyle in the big museum and be used to understand the diversity of fish on this planet. So it's pretty exciting to be able to contribute to such an effort.
Very, very cool. Let's grab a couple more questions here, Joe. This is kind of a fun one. Do you ever go to the markets to see what's in the markets? Maybe there's something that you missed in the river.
Totally, totally. Any way that you can see the fish, you do it. So I love strolling through the fish market and seeing what's for sale. Usually here in Zambia, most of the fish that you see at the market aren't sold fresh. They're either smoked or dried. So sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to identify them to species level, but you can get an idea of the diversity in the area depending on what fish are being sold. So I really love looking around in the fish markets and seeing what other people are catching. I also love inspecting the catch of local fishermen. So whenever we see someone canoeing past us with a bunch of fish in their boat, I will stop and I will, look at every single fish that they've caught. And if they've got something that I don't have or I think is very interesting, I'll buy it off them.
Yeah.
And, I think that they think I'm going to eat it, but I end up putting it in formaldehyde. So no one is going to eat that fish. but it will end up in a museum and it'll be there forever for future scientists to study. So very often I learn a lot from the local fishermen. I might have a PhD, but they know the system way better than I ever will. So I love exploring other people's catch and learning from them and
Yeah.
tagging along. If I can go in their in their boat with them and check their nets, I just love it. It's such a great experience.
All right. I've got more questions here in the chat. This is a fun one from a group in Nova Scotia. So you can catch and you can see the species, but are you ever able to quantify? So say, I think there's this many of this species in the river, or is that just too hard?
With our approach, and our approach is paddle down the river and study it. We don't have the opportunity to understand the abundance of these fishes, which is really tough. But the way that we do that actually is we talk to the local community. We
Hmm.
ask them, are abundances higher or lower? Are certain species more or less rare? And like I've said before, they know the system so well that they know what is happening. So in Angola, for example, I heard from a lot of fishermen that around the town of Cuito River, there are very few fish remaining. And so fishermen in that area, what they do is they'll paddle for a full day or 2 days upstream or downstream to go to the areas where there still are a lot of fish. So even in remote Angola, you might actually be seeing the first evidence of overexploitation of fisheries. So, while I can't say how the fish are, the local fishermen certainly can. And so I ask that question a lot so that I can learn about the patterns of fish abundance and diversity along the river system.
All right. Miss Clark's class has sent in a few more questions, and they want to know maybe the favorite fish you've caught recently, and then how many catfish you've caught.
Whew. I've caught a lot of catfish. That's a hard one. uh, Golly. Um, you know, my favorite fish I've caught recently, actually 2 days ago, I caught a type of fish that I have never seen before. It's called a naria. It's a weird little, kind of boring looking fish. But immediately when I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, I have never in my life seen this fish. And I've collected over 60,000 fish in Africa. So to see something new, to see something for the first time is an unbelievable excitement for me. So that is probably my highlight fish as of late. And boy, catfishes, tons of catfish. The catfish here are so diverse. You've got air breathing catfish, you've got squeakers, you've got grunters, you've got electric catfish, you've got the rapids adapted catfish. They are unbelievable. You've got ones that live in the open water and eat fruit. I mean, the catfish here basically fill every ecological niche you can imagine. And I love the catfish, but some of them are really spiny and even venomous. So some of the catfish will sting you like a bee. So you gotta know your catfish before you handle them willy-nilly. But my favorite catfish of all time is the electric catfish. It looks like a swimming sausage. It's like this weird pink fatty fish, but it can produce up to 450 volts of electricity. And when you see an electric catfish, or when you are shocked by an electric catfish, you never forget it. So that is all time, probably one of my favorite fish of all time.
All right. Well, Joe, you talked about electrofishing, but you use other techniques. So I want to share a video with classrooms to highlight one of them. And then maybe if there's a couple other techniques you use, you can tell us about them. So this is a promo video you made for us years ago when you were in Gabon. So let's take a look at this little promo together. I think classrooms will like it. It's a cool method for grabbing those fish. Let me pick the right video. There it is. Here we go.
I'm Joe Cutler, and I'm exploring the fish diversity of the Cuito River in Gabon. And when I explore, I do it by the seat of my pants. Hey, looks like I've got something.
All right, so there's back in time, a different river, a different country. I think you had an audience there too. You could hear some of the kids laughing in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, but a similar beard, you can tell I had been in the field for a while. That is my trusty cast net. I travel everywhere with a cast net because it is an amazing way to sample fishes. You know, in an area like this, it is too deep for me to go in with my net or with my electrofisher. But if I threw a cast net out into this open water, I would be catching fish. So I always carry a cast net with me, and I use it in the right habitats. I don't use it anywhere. I don't use it where it's going to get stuck in the trees or stuck in the rocks. I don't do it in the rapids too much because you could be ripped into the water and swept to your death. But I carry a lot of different fishing gear because you catch different fish with different methodologies. So I've got dip nets, which is it's like a hoop on a stick with a net in it. And you just scoop that through the water or through the aquatic vegetation on the banks. And that works really well in like a small stream or in an area where there's a lot of aquatic vegetation. You get a lot of the little fish, and the little fish are most of the diversity. So I care a lot about the little fish. I also carry a trap, which I put out every single night. And that trap is really good for catching things like catfish that are nighttime active. I've got what's called a fyke net. And this is kind of a combination of like a big net plus a trap. And so it's got a wing, and then it's got a series of metal circles in it that are netted. And as the fish reach the wing, then they get pushed down and into these metal circles or throats. And then once they get inside, they can't find the escape, and you catch the fish. So, and then finally, I actually do carry a fishing pole with me. And I use the fishing pole not just to catch dinner, but also because you catch different fish with a fishing pole. You pretty much only catch predators when you're fishing with hook and line. So if I want to see a tiger fish, some cichlids here, I've got to use a fishing pole. And
Okay, we've had a pretty good signal so far, but Joe is pretty remote, so we might lose him for a moment. We might see the wheel start spinning as it tries to reload. Oh, I think we got him back.
got you back.
Perfect. You were just talking about catching the tiger fish. You have to do that to catch the predators. Use the reel.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just saying that this habitat looks spectacular. So maybe tonight or maybe tomorrow, I'm going to pull out my trusty rod and reel and see if I can catch some fish. Interestingly, I kind of doubt that they're going to be tigerfish here. I think we're too high up in the system, but we may have African pike. We may have some of the largemouth cichlids. So you never know what you're going to catch. That's one of the joys of fish and fishing. Every single time you do it, you get the thrill of exploration.
All right, Joe, I've got two more questions for you, and then maybe you can just give us a little synopsis of what's to come over the next few weeks before we let you go. So I'll put these two questions together. One is, you talked about having to identify a new species to science, you need several specimens. So how many generally do you need to be able to have that identification?
Well, the more the better. Ideally, you have everything from babies all the way to adults. You want males and females. You want to be able to compare them. And sometimes, a juvenile looks really different than the parent. But if you catch something that's weird enough, you can describe a species with a single fish.
Okay.
And we've done that actually. In Gabon, we described a new species of fish, not just a new species, but a new genus with one specimen. It's one of those mormyrids, one of those weakly electric fish that are really smart. Unlike anything ever collected before. So, new genus, one specimen. It is possible, but it's not preferred.
All right. So two-parter coming your way, Joe. So we saw some of the smaller specimens. We have John curious about the biggest fish you've caught recently. And then our Nova Scotian crew wants to know if you can put a rough number on maybe how many new species you've described through your career.
Well, I'm going to answer the second one first because it's easier. I've personally described 2 species, but that's because I don't spend very much time in the museum. I'm mostly out here on the river, and other people are actually describing the fish for me. Now, biggest fish I've caught recently, on the Cuito River, I caught my biggest tigerfish ever. It was probably about 8 fish, about a 15 or 16 pound fish, and it was a real monster. That is one of those, river monsters that has massive teeth, and it looks really scary. So that was my biggest recent catch, and it was a beast. I've caught a lot of tigerfish, but never one that was like that before. So definitely a bucket list fish for any fisherman out there.
All right, Joe. And so, yeah, you finished your expedition in Angola. You've had a tiny little break as you kind of made your way to Zambia. What are the next few weeks going to look like on this one?
Yeah, so we are, set to launch here on the Kabompo day after tomorrow. And we've got a long paddle down to reach the Zambezi. And it's going to be a fascinating river. So the Kabompo is considered to be the second deepest river in Africa. That's going to be one of the scientific things that we try to test on this expedition. But it's also a river that is changing really rapidly. So there, about 10 or 15 years ago, gold and copper and nickel were discovered in the Kabompo system. There's one massive mine just a little ways downstream from us. And I'm really curious to see how the river changes as we move downstream. So we probably have a month or maybe a month and a half of paddling to survey this whole river all the way down to the Zambezi. We've got a lot of rapids. We've got a lot of fast flowing water. We have crocodiles and hippos. Every single day, we'll move camp. We'll paddle down river as far as we can. We'll set up another camp and we'll do all the research. What I'm really curious about for this river is how the mine is affecting the river, how that then affects the Zambezi system, and to get a baseline of how the system is today, because there's a lot more mining coming into the Kabompo drainage. In 5 or 10 years, there could be mines everywhere along this river. And so the question is, how is it today? How is it in its natural state? And how can we, develop the industry and the economy without disturbing this relatively pristine and untouched river system? So there's a lot to discover. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. I mean, we're going to be paddling over 700 kilometers, which anybody who's been out for a long day's paddle knows that's going to be brutal. Our hands will be blistered and bruised, and we will be stung by so many bees and wasps and bitten by mosquitoes, hopefully not bitten by crocodiles or hippos, but we've got our work cut out for us, and it's going to be an incredible transect. And this transect, if I complete the whole thing, will put me over 8,000 kilometers surveyed in Africa by canoe. So I'm slowly ticking up my count of how many rivers and how many kilometers I've paddled. And certainly there are some exciting fish ahead as well.
Joe, it's just amazing. Absolutely incredible. I want to start by just thanking our classrooms and those who tuned in today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sending in those amazing questions. I know more will tune in to the recording, so shout out to those classrooms. Joe, you were so generous with your time today. You've got such, another big expedition in another beautiful part of the world. We're all wishing you luck, and we can't wait to hear how it goes. And actually, do you think we'll still be able to connect once or twice before the end of the school year?
I'd love to do a couple more live streams. So this next stretch of river is really hectic. It's going to be overgrown, lots of rapids. So we're going to be starting our transect using inflatable boats. And then once we get to the next bridge, it should be much more open. So we're going to switch over to canoes, and then we'll have our Starlink and should be able to connect. So hopefully, same time, same place next week, we can connect again.
All right, Joe, sounds good. Keep me in the loop, and I'll make sure we have a crew to hang out.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. Great to see you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. It's such a pleasure.
All right. Signing off for now. Thanks, everyone. All right.